It's very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barger, the president of Hell's Angels.
This is 1095. Hey John, how you doing? Good morning. I was going to say it's good morning here, but good afternoon. End of the day there, yeah, right? So.
Hi Matt, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And before we get into it, where are you right now? So you're in Canada, yeah?
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and it's Canada Day weekend of all things. July 1st is the anniversary of the birth of our nation, our great nation.
Oh, well, congratulations, and hopefully I'm not eating into any holiday time. I know it's Saturday, end of Saturday there. So, hey, look, a great starting point. Before even asking you to kind of give a bit of an introduction, I was doing a bit of research, trying to look at, the books you've written. My first question is, how many books have you written? Because it looks like a fair few.
Okay, well, it's okay. It's over 100.
Wow.
But mind you, they're not very long. The one that I uploaded today is called Lee Hacklin, Private Investigator and Swordplay. Basically, what I'm writing is crime fiction, a pulp fiction, good guys and bad guys. That one came in at about 30 pages. They're getting shorter and shorter. My first few books were between 100 and 200 pages. But I find that the more that I write, Oscar Wilde said brevity is the soul of wit. And I just feel that most people, I don't want to generalize too much, really don't have time to read these super thick books.
So true.
And
yeah.
a story is as long as it needs to be. And I'm starting to think of them more and more as episodes of a long-running television series.
Cool.
So,
honestly, that's it's a good idea this day and age, because people, as much as I'd love to think that everyone wants long form, a lot of people want short form content, right? So I do think it makes a lot of sense. Before I dig into it more, though, do you want to just give a bit of an intro on your background, your journey? I know it sounds pretty interesting from the little snippets I've had on email back and forth. So, yeah, who is John
Thank
Leister?
you so much, Matt. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, well, I was born in 1965. And when I was a kid, I grew up in the 1970s. I was a comic book nerd. I was way ahead of the curve, I feel. And so I had a huge collection of Marvel and DC comics. I wanted to be a comic book artist. And I grew up at a time where that stuff was kind of looked down upon. So I felt that I was kind of stigmatized. I was a little bit of an outsider because I was Canadian and I wasn't into hockey. I mean, if you're a Canadian boy and you don't like hockey, it's almost like the Salem witch trials. It's almost like they're going to cast you out or stone you to death. I'm exaggerating just a little bit. So I was just wired differently from most of the other boys. I mean, I had some friends growing up, but I was kind of an outsider. And so I don't know why I gave up drawing. I was good at it, but I guess I got lazy. And then after high school, I tried acting for a couple of years. There was an acting school called the Breck Academy. Peter Breck. Do you remember a show called The Big Valley? It was a Western, maybe before your time.
Yeah.
Peter Breck was an American actor who came to Vancouver and he started this acting school. So I just walked by this acting school one day. I was in my early 20s. My life was going nowhere. I really didn't have very much direction. Other than I always felt that I had an artsy spirit. I was always meant to do something creative with my life. So I took acting classes for a couple of years. And I got to meet Richard Dreyfuss. He came to the Academy. He was shooting Stakeout with Emilio Estevez back in the day. And I don't mean to name drop. I'm just sharing my story. I also got to meet Gene Hackman. He came to the Academy. He was filming Narrow Margin at the time. And I was going for it. I had an agent and I was going to auditions. And I was doing some writing back then, too. I was writing scenes for myself and my scene partners. And I was writing monologues for my auditions. And I never got the part. But the casting directors would always seem to be impressed because they say, "Oh, I never heard that monologue before." I says, "Well, that's because I wrote it." And so I was an extra in Rocky IV. That's kind of my 15 minutes of fame. You don't see me in the movie, but me and my buddy Jeff, we went to, there was an open casting call. And so the big fight at the end with Ivan Drago was shot at the Agrodome in Vancouver. I guess this would be 1985. So I got to see that fight live, believe it or not, chanting Rocky, Rocky. And unfortunately, I don't mean to gross you or any of your listeners out. Do you know what psoriasis is?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is? It's pretty common health condition. And so for some of your listeners who might not be familiar with it, basically just some of our bodies generate more dry skin than would be considered normal. And psoriasis is exacerbated by mitigating factors such as stress and feelings of low self-esteem. And my diet sucked. I'm a recovering sugar junkie. I used to weigh anywhere from 235 to 250 pounds. That's how overweight I was because I was addicted to junk food. So it just got to be so bad that literally pieces of skin were coming off my face. And so I gave up on my dream of acting. And I've been a security guard of all things for 35 years. That's always been my bread and butter job. But I always knew in my heart that I was meant to do something creative with my life. But I just kind of fell into this routine of just keeping my head above the water. And what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Pizza and KFC. And coming home after work with a huge stack of DVDs. I was living a very non-productive lifestyle. Let's put it that way. It all changed in 2019, my 53rd year of corporeal existence. And I don't mean to be pushy or preachy about this stuff. I'm just sharing my story. I read all these self-help books. I was reading Anthony Robbins and Deepak Chopra and Stuart Wilde and all these great philosophers. I was trying to fill my head with all this positive information, and it all made sense to me. And every so often I would have a moment of clarity. I would kind of take a baby step towards self-manifestation, but I kept falling back to my comfort zone, like one step forward, two steps back. That all changed in 2019, which I consider my rebirth year. Chronologically, I'm 58, but in terms of my faith, in terms of my connection to God, I consider myself 5 years old because it was 5 years ago that I reached out to God and I said, "Our Heavenly Father, I don't know if you're real. I don't know if I'm talking to myself right now, but I had to accept that I'm the kind of guy that tries a little bit harder when I have it in my mind's eye that someone who loves me and accepts me unconditionally for who I am, isn't judging me, isn't criticizing me. It's like, hey, this is John Leister. This is who I am, is rooting for me to make at least some effort towards self-manifestation." So just to backtrack just a little bit, in 2019, I had written a bunch of short stories about a private detective named Lee Hacklin. And I just wrote them at work one day. I was working security at this job. It was the world's easiest job. Like literally, I was pushing a button all day, letting trucks into the building. It was just like I'm getting paid to do this. And so I just cranked out these short stories for my own amusement more than anything else. And then after I reached out to God and asked him to help me, I don't know if you do need creative writing, Matthew. It's very hard to be objective. You do. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
So you're a fellow writer. I love that. So it's very hard to be objective about your own stuff, right? But I had written these stories in 2005, and when I dusted them, and thank God I made hard copies. When I dusted them off in 2019, the pages were curled and they were yellow and they were dusty. I thought, if someone else had written these stories, I know I would like them because I've always been a very avid reader. And so that was the beginning of my life's journey of becoming a self-published author. And it was a tremendous uphill struggle for me. I didn't mean to play the world's smallest violin, to get that first book published. My first book, plug, is called The Collected Cases of Lee Hacklin, 1970s Private Investigator. Book one was a collection of these first short stories that I wrote. And initially I was dealing with Amazon and they were rejecting my banking information. And then I would go to the bank and they say, no, it's the right information. So I was going in circles, losing my mind. And it's such an important life lesson, I feel, Matthew, that we all need to remind ourselves sometimes, no matter how old we are, that when we embark on a new adventure, a new journey, we have to have it in our mind's eye that there's going to be hiccups along the way. I thought 3 clicks of a mouse and boom, I'm a self-published author. How hard can this be? It wasn't. It was a struggle. And so after about a month or so, when I saw on the screen for the first time, congratulations, your ebook has been published. Have you seen the movie Billy Elliot about the boy who wants to be a ballet dancer?
A long time ago. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I saw it when it came out. So
beautiful movie. So there's a scene where Billy, he's auditioning at the ballet school, and the auditioners ask him, "How do you feel when you dance?" He said, "Well, I feel like electricity." Well, that's how I felt, Matthew, when I crossed that finish line. I thought, gosh, so that's what that feels like. I mean, some people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, they live their whole lives that way. They have a goal, they move towards it. Whatever hiccups, whatever obstacles, that's fuel to the fire. But some of us are not that, consistently motivated because we don't have the mindset. So it was a very unusual feeling for me to start something. And then for once in my life, I didn't bail. Right? I didn't hit the ejector seat button, like James Bond, Goldfinger, the Aston Martin. For once, I actually stayed the course. So I remember thinking, I'm 53. I don't know how many years I have left. I'm lucky I made it this far. I want to feel this way all the time. And so that feeling which I was so unaccustomed to, has been a great motivator for me. And that's why I've been writing like crazy. I mean, I've been writing almost every single day since 2019. I write old school. I have a dollar store, a notebook that I crack open, and after about an hour or so, I usually have at least a couple of single space pages. I don't claim to be good at it. I just know that I can do it. And every time I write, I make myself laugh. I make myself cry. I get excited. I mean, I've been writing this series, this Lee Ackland series, since 2019 now, and I keep coming up with new kinds of aspects of this character. And again, it's this feeling of discovery. And again, I feel, Matthew, that it's another important life lesson. You never really know what you want to do with your life until you actually do it. You have to do it. And then once you make that discovery, the feeling that it gives you, then that feeling is a motivator. And I also feel that, and again, it's all about motivation. It's all about having a mindset that motivates us to do whatever it is that we're meant to do with our lives versus procrastination and making excuses. You know, when I started making these, another thing is I lost 65 pounds after I reached out to God. The vegetables started looking very attractive to me, and eating all this KFC and right, because when you love yourself, and it's not narcissism to love yourself, there's a big difference between the two. Again, love is such a great motivator. And so my diet changed dramatically. I started lifting weights. I post videos of myself working out on my Facebook page. I started a group page called Johnny's Way. Everybody listening to this podcast, please feel free to join. Over 800 members now. And what I write, what I like to think are uplifting and inspiring essays about self-manifestation and self-belief, particularly for people who are my age, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are in their 50s and they're thinking, oh, it's too late, it's too late. It's not too late. Herman Wouk, one of my favorite writers, he wrote his last book when he was 100 years old. You know, we have to live in the present. We have to. Stuart Wilde, do you know who Stuart Wilde is? He was a British, he was kind of a stand-up comic, also kind of a self-help guru, kind of a motivational speaker. He had this wonderful concept called the eternal now, which is that basically we have to live our lives in the present all the time. That's why I don't watch the news. I try to avoid negative people. I don't like to think about my pet peeves. I try to think about what's within my control. And we don't want to think about the past too much, because when we think about the past, it really doesn't matter if it's a happy memory or if it's a sad memory. All those feelings are going to come back to the present, and they disempower us. It's all about developing a mindset for ourselves that empowers us to synchronize ourselves with whatever it is that we want to do with our lives. And so that all happened for me once I reached out to God. Because to me, God is like big. I'm sorry, I'm almost done.
Yeah.
Big Brother is almost like big. You know, Big Brother from 1984. Big Brother is watching you, right? But in a good way, in a loving way, in a paternal way, kind of like Yoda in Luke Skywalker's rucksack, whispering in my ear all the time, "Don't give up. Don't procrastinate. Don't make excuses. Get off the couch. Get your butt in gear and do." And it's all about the doing. And never mind how much money, you know, if these stories, I want to see a Lee Ackland streaming series on Netflix. I mean, I want to ring that bell. That's the goal that I'm moving towards. I want to connect with my Alan Ladd Jr. He was the executive at Fox who greenlit Star Wars back in the day when George Lucas was trying to sell Star Wars and nobody was biting. And it's also an important life lesson too, I feel. You can have a really great idea, but everybody in your inner circle thinks that it's total garbage, right? That doesn't mean that they're right, they're not right, they're wrong. You just have to connect with that one person. Well, it's not that they're wrong, they're not visionaries. They don't see the vision that you have that's unique to you. So you have to keep banging on doors, which is why I'm reaching out to nice people like yourself. Do I want to promote? Am I about self-promotion? 100%. But I also like to think that my story will hopefully inspire other people like myself who feel like the ship of their lives is a Titanic. And that's how I felt back in the day. Now I feel like the ship of my life is the USS Enterprise and going at warp speed. So I'm sorry. I know I prattle on. That's my story in a nutshell.
That's cool. Now I want to.
You have the floor.
Before I ask about writing, I wanted to ask about just your reaching out to God. Obviously, this is a pivotal moment in your life. It sounds like everything has happened since then. Of course, a lot happened before it, but clearly a lot of the positivity and the productivity and has come from your spirituality. And what were you at a completely low point? Did you hit a a kind of turning point, or you hit? I mean, it doesn't it doesn't sound like you were completely at a low point, but clearly you were. What was that trigger point when you reached out and decided, hey, I need a complete U-turn here, or whatever it was?
I love this question because I have a concise, concrete answer that won't be a never-ending monologue. I can sum it up in one word: loneliness.
Right.
I was
Okay.
spending way too much time by myself, and I, some of us are so into stories. Stories are such an immersive experience for some of us, and I'm that kind of guy. Whether it's comic books or movies or TV shows or novels, I just, it's like the Matrix, and so I just reached a saturation point where I had enough. And that's what, again, loneliness. I just got tired of it. I got tired of feeling bad about myself, and I just had to accept myself. And so again, that was just a motivator to reach out to God and to take this leap of faith. And if it turns out that I'm wrong, if it turns out that the agnostics and the atheists of the world are right, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference because it's a philosophy that works for me. And if it doesn't work for other people, that's fine. Different strokes. We're not a race of clones or robots. We're a race of individuals. But for goodness sakes, for anybody out there who feels like I did, like I was reaching the end of my rope in life, take a leap of faith, because once we feel loved, then we feel worthy. And once we feel worthy, I feel that again, this has been my experience. The obstacles, once I reached out to God, I'm not suggesting that anything mystical happened, but it was like, boom. It was like all these obstacles in my mind that were completely self-created. It's like the shields came down and I was off and running. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And I'm having more fun. I'm having 1,000 times more fun doing this right now, getting to know nice people like yourself who are fellow Bliss followers, than lying on the couch and being a couch potato. I will never go back to that life. There's not a chance in heck that I would ever go back to that life because it's too passive. I want to be productive. I want to be a player. The difference between being a player in the game of life versus a bench warmer is the difference between living and existing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Sure it does. And congratulations on having God as your publisher, because that's kind of sounds like that sounds like that's what happened. So how did that
I love that.
How did that affect your writing? It clearly affected your motivation and your state of mind and your living in the moment and everything else. But on a very practical level, did it change your writing at all, or it just allowed you to get up and have more purpose and meaning?
I've always been writing. I mean, I've been writing since I was a little kid. But when I was writing stuff in my 20s, I was trying. I think a lot of young writers try to. You're always trying to write something different. You're trying to write something that's like completely unique. And so the stuff that I wrote in my 20s is really not very good. I wouldn't feed it to a dog. I read some of that stuff, but once I picked a genre. Like I was a huge fan of Robert B. Parker. He was created a character called Spencer. He's kind of the American Sherlock Holmes. And I read his books when I was a young man. And again, a private detective told from a first person narrative. And I remember thinking, I think I can do this. Once I picked a genre, the detective genre, and sort of accepted the when people read a story, they have expectations, right? I mean, if you write a story about World War III, people are going to expect big battles and political intrigue, right? If it's just a bunch of people sitting around talking, then you're not going to make the reader happy. Once I started writing genre, pick this genre, and the comfort that I had with writing this genre, then I didn't have the barriers that I had before when I was a young man trying to do something different, trying to think something out of the box. Again, it's whatever works for you. So it's weird because I really like fantasy and science fiction and superheroes. Like those are my favorite genres as a fan. And I tried writing a superhero. I wrote a superhero trilogy called Morning Star's Night, which is basically Superman meets the Book of Revelations.
Yep.
And I'm super proud of how it turned out. I'm proud of all of my books. But I will never write in that genre again because you have to explain everything. You have to explain the powers and how can he fly and this and that and the other thing. That's expository. I don't like to write that way. to answer your question, I'm trying to answer your question, but how it affected my writing, again, I discovered that what I really like to write is character dynamics,
Right.
right? Yeah, I like to write sort of humorously and observing other people's behavior. And Lee is sort of the straight man to all these weird and wild and eccentric other characters that he creates, that he encounters. And so I've just discovered that that's what I like to write. It's not so much about story. My stories are very simple. I mean, what I'm writing basically good guys and bad guys, but it's the characters. You look at Karate Kid, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. That story goes all the way back to David and Goliath, right? But Robert Mark Kamen created Miyagi, who was such a unique character, and the chemistry that he had with Daniel was so unique. That, to me, in my opinion, that's what makes a story special. Creating unique characters, again, that the reader and the audience can relate to. That's why you look at Peanuts and Archie and all these Marvel Comics characters. They resonate with each generation, because we all know a kid like Charlie Brown, right? Or we see ourselves in Charlie Brown. And so you can create a story that's the most cliched story that people have seen a million times. It's fine. Look at Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
Star Wars, The Matrix, The Terminator, they're all kind of the same plot, right? But the people who write those stories give them their own flavor. And that's what I always tell people. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I want to write a book, but I have nothing original." I'm like, "Oh gosh, if I had that mindset, you'd be interviewing somebody else right now." All my stories can be compared to something that's come before. I wrote a science fiction series called The Taking of Red Star 1. It's basically The Hunt for Red October meets Star Trek. If I hadn't read The Hunt for Red October, if I hadn't read that book and seen that movie, those books don't exist. I freely admit it. I think that's the key. You just tell people, it's like, yeah, this is like Terry Brooks wrote The Sword of Shannara. And I read that book when I was in high school, and I thought, man, this guy just read Lord of the Rings, and he's changed the names of the characters, and instead of a ring, it's a sword. But you know what? I didn't care, because I enjoyed the story. And the Tolkien estate, they didn't sue him. They didn't seem to be annoyed by this. And Terry Brooks became one of the most successful fantasy authors of all time. When you start writing something, that's what makes it original. That is coming from you or me or any of your listeners, because we all have our own unique filters. That's a little bit different from the next person.
Do you have a process when you approach a new project, when you're writing a new book? You're obviously very character driven, almost kind of like screenplay writing, actually. But when you sit down and write a book, do you have a process that you work to, or do you completely go with the flow creatively, or what is your approach?
I start with a very general idea. Like, for example, my latest Lee Hacklin is called Swordplay. And I was just goofing around on the internet one day, and I saw a website about Zatoichi, who is a Japanese samurai character. He's blind, and he travels around from village to village. I thought, I want to do that. I want to do a 70s version of that character. So again, it's just you have an idea, and if it gets you excited, then you should do it. And then my process, the physical process, is I open my old school notebook, I have my big pen in my hand, and I just scribble it all down. When I was in high school, I had an English teacher, Mr. Henderson. He had us do an exercise called speed writing. Did you have this experience?
I've done it, but not at school. But yeah, and I've done some other, kind of. There's some online
so it's basically
competitions like that. You
would write on the blackboard, I was on my way home from school, ... and you had a stopwatch, and you had to write stream of consciousness nonstop for 5 minutes. Yep. And so, back in the day, we came up with some pretty crazy scenarios. But I'm so glad that I have the sense memory. I'm so glad that I learned that when I was in high school. But one of the few things in high school that I learned that was actually useful, because that's how I write. I just open my notebook and I'm off and running. I've seen so many movies and read so many novels and so many TV shows. Basically, all I'm doing is I'm just regurgitating all of this stuff, but again, through my filter and through the eyes of my main character. And I had no idea in 2019 that I could, when I wrote my first novel, The Treehouse Avengers, which is a standalone, I remember thinking, well, maybe this is it. Maybe I'll just spend the rest of my life trying to get this made into a movie or maybe a graphic novel or animation. But but then I kept asking myself, what if? What if Lee's mother was accused of a murder? That became homicide. What if Lee was framed for a crime? That became picture frame up. What if there was a nuclear bomb in New York City and Lee had 24 hours to find it? That became Army Get Down and Boogie. What if? This is what I was meant to do with my life. This is my thing. We all have at least one thing that we're good at. And I've discovered since 2019 that, and again, I might be the only person in the world who feels this way, that this is again, I don't claim to be good at it. I just know that I can do it. I never get writer's block. I don't know what that is. What is that, writer's block? That's like saying I have exercise block or eating healthy block. Either right? You either want to do it or you don't want to do it. And I love writing. I write every single day on my Facebook page or in my notebook. It's my bliss. And if I didn't have to do my full-time job still, I'm still working security full-time, I would be doing a lot more writing. There's a line that Captain America has where he says, "I can do this all day," and that's how I feel about writing.
Awesome.
It's my bliss. Thank
Awesome.
you. And it took me a long time to get here, but better late than never. And that's my message to the world: better late than never. Better now than never.
Well, good on you. And you're certainly, like I say, putting out a lot of content, which is great. Well, what is that for people out there that are looking to self-publish? What's the self-publishing journey been like? Like, what has been easy? What has been difficult? Yeah, I mean, give some advice and interesting to hear your perspective.
So I gave up on Amazon because I still had some hiccups with them. And I discovered another website called Draft2 Digital, the number 2. Okay. And so this website, anybody out there who wants to be a self-published author, it's super easy to use. I've never had a hiccup with Draft2 Digital. And it's free. And it explains everything. I didn't need anybody to help me post my first book on Draft2 Digital. And what they do is they springboard your books to other platforms. So my books are available on Apple, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and a few others. And then I found another website called Post to My Wall. And again, it's free, super easy to use. And that's how I design my book covers. So I highly recommend Draft2 Digital.
So you're not publishing just digitally. You're publishing. So if I buy your books, I can get a hard copy sent to me as well. You're doing, or is it all digital? Just digital.
That's just a bit of a sore spot with me. I that's something that I need to do. I know if I didn't have to work full time, I work 40 hours a week. I'm still a security guard. That's still my bread and butter job. That's, I know a lot of writers have, that's something that I need to do. That's something that I need to get off my butt. That's an unturned stone.
Well, you've got no shortage of material to play with there. I mean, that's the good thing, because to be honest, I think everything else is just process, right? I mean, really the creative part is the biggest obstacle, and you've clearly got a lot of material there to be able to go and publish some hard copies as well.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking that, do you want to just list through some links as we kind of draw to a close? I want to make sure that I get them in the speaker notes for people. So you just said, so for anyone listening or watching who's a writer who wants to understand, I'll put these all in the speaker notes. So Draft to Digital, what's the URL? Is it a 2 or, yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay. If you go to Kobo, KOBO.com, if you enter John Leister, you can check out all my books. They're all excerpted. Now, my email is johnleister601@hotmail.com. I've done this before, and time permitting, I would be more than happy to email anyone who's interested one of my books or one of my short stories. I mean, I want to make money doing this, but at the end of the day, it's about sharing. And I love getting feedback from people, whether it's positive or negative. I've had some negative feedback too, and I love it. It's like, hey, well, at least you read my stuff. You didn't like it, but you took the time to read it. That's nice. And that's what I always tell writers. If you get criticism, don't be sensitive about it. Read it, and you might get something out of it that you might benefit in some way. And so Kobo, Barnes & Noble is another one, Apple, and as I said, my Facebook group page is called Johnny's Way. I have 2 podcasts. One is called the Johnny's Way Podcast, and it can be heard on either of my Facebook pages. And what I do is I just read excerpts from my stories into my phone. And very recently, I started another podcast called The Canadian Bro Show with my childhood friend, Paul Bale. And we've done 3 episodes so far.
Cool.
And we just talk about growing up together. And our last episode, we keep it light. We avoid politics. And, and we don't want to talk about anything that's controversial. We talk about pop culture and our life journeys. And that's basically it. My Facebook page is John Leister. And if you go to YouTube and if you enter John Leister Author, you can check out some of the podcasts that I've been on. It's pretty much the same stuff.
Cool. I'll try and dig out all of those and put them all in the speaker notes. And yeah, look, I appreciate you doing this kind of street side podcast on a Saturday night or Saturday late afternoon.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Love your positivity. Well done on getting all of that content out there. And yeah, thanks for jumping on and chatting for half an hour. All the best.
Thank you, Matt.
Cool. Have a good rest of the weekend.
Can I say one?
Yeah,
can I say one more thing before we go?
Of course you can.
One more thing.
Go for it.
Just a little anecdote. I took a picture of myself holding a book by an author named Mike Madden. He writes the Jack Ryan series. He's one of the writers who took over from Tom Clancy after Tom Clancy passed away. This guy is a best-selling author. He sold millions of books. I told him about my group page, Johnny's Way. Well, guess what, Matthew? He joined. And this is another one, right? That's pretty cool, right? Cool. And take advantage of this technology, everybody. Reach out to people. You meet the most amazing people, and they can open doors for you. Or you might meet someone that you wind up spending the rest of your life with. You make new friends. The people my age who are so disdainful of this technology. I see this as a glorious golden age that we're living in. You're in Thailand. I'm in Vancouver. It's almost like we're in the same room. So that's it. I'm done.
Awesome. John Leister, Johnny's Way. Yeah, I'll jump on there as well. So cool.
Thank you, sir.
It's been good to chat, to meet, and very interesting story. Appreciate you sharing.
Thank you, Matt.
Take care.
Cheers.
We want to be free to do what we want to
Two were
do.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barger, the president of the Hells Angels.
This is 1095